Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the fourth session of the five-part Tasmanian Timber webinar series. To start, I'd like to welcome our presenter, Michael Lee, who will be guiding you through the use of timber in commercial buildings. Mick is the technical manager for the Tasmanian Timber Campaign, bringing nearly 40 years of experience in the timber industry. Mick spent many years as technical officer at the Centre for Sustainable Architecture with Wood at the University of Tasmania and continues to consult with timber processors across Tassie. Mick works closely with builders, designers, architects to help them find timber solutions in the built environment, recommending the right timber for the right application, and provides after sales and sourcing support. Mick also manages the Tasmanian Timber Technical Helpline. So when you call the 1300 number on our website, you're speaking directly with him. Mick is a certified project professional and passionate advocate for Tassie timber in the built environment. He is an incredible resource for specifiers needing any technical support. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Mick. And once Mick gets started, I'll encourage you to put your questions into the chat. If Mick can answer those questions easily in the moment, he'll answer those for you. But if it requires a bit more of an in-depth response, we'll come back to those at the end. But otherwise, enjoy. I'm passing that over to you, Mick.
Thanks, Poppy. That's great. Yeah, and thank you for the wrap up there. I didn't know I was that good. But anyway,
Sorry, Mick, it looks like you're on mute. Sorry, all good, all good.
we're good. Can you hear me now?
I've got you now.
Thank you. Thanks, Poppy, and thanks for the wrap up there. Um, as normal, this is quite an exciting one for me because commercial builds and the use of timber in them are increasingly becoming a norm, but they're exceedingly exciting for the environment. So just a few quick notes to start with. The Tasmanian Timber Promotion Board, if you've been on these webinars before, have been around since 1970 and we're part of the act of government. Money comes in from the industry to market and to promote Tas timber. Sustainability from Tasmania, which is always a question. It's a question I get 3 or 4 times a week. Tasmania has over 800,000 hectares of sustainable production forests, of which only 1% is harvested annually. Now, that's 1% of 800,000 hectares. So there is no issue about sustainability, and there is no issue on supply of Tas oak, blackwood myrtle, or any of the other species available. So, yeah, just a note on that. I think this is quite interesting, and this comes from Maria, the chair of the Tas Promotion Board, Timber Promotion Board. The climate conversation is full of genuinely hard trade-offs. This isn't one. Sustainably managed Tasmania timber stores carbon, builds healthier places to live and work, and strengthens the economy and reduces our dependence on imports. Helps guard against bushfires, and the question was neither whether we can afford to keep doing it well, is whether we can afford not to, which is very true and very topical at the moment with the new legislations and that coming in. Carbon as a science, and please everyone, this will be online, and I'm not going to read these words for words, but a five-story timber building can store up to 186 kilograms of carbon per square metre, more than 3 times the carbon density of the world's most carbon-rich natural forests. Scaled across decades of global building, that's a cumulative sink of 2 to 20 gigatons. It is just a phenomenal use of carbon storage and the timber in builds. The other thing that I find interesting is the world builds the equivalent of a new city the size of Paris roughly every week, and concrete and steel behind it are the major sources of global emissions. Research suggests construction will become something that's never been a place where carbon is stored, not released. A landmark study from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research found that five-story timber buildings can hold up to the 186 kilograms of carbon per square metre, as I said, more than three times the carbon density of the world's most carbon-rich forest. Again, there's no safer way of storing carbon. Okay, I'm just going to play a short video here from St. Luke's, which will give you some insight into, the thought behind a carbon-friendly build, Tasmania's largest sustainable build, and a timber build, which is quite iconic.
St Luke's is Tasmania's largest health insurer now. We're more than just a health insurer, we're a health business. Launceston head office, we're in 4 different buildings. We needed one place where we can all be together. And that grew from finding a building and just getting into it to building something that's the largest office building in Launceston, 7,500 square metres. We want this building to reflect our culture of being healthy and our desire to have the healthiest home on the planet. 2 of the 4 architects came back with timber, healthy internally for our staff, healthy in terms of the carbon sink for the community, and healthy in driving people's view on what should be built and how it should be built in the future. So being a bit of a leader. Before that, we had to find the site, which is a wonderful site with an old auction house, and Terroir did a great job of also saying, well, we want to preserve as much as we can, because that's also part of regenerating it. In terms of staff turnovers are measured, days off through sickness, they have significantly reduced since we've come into this building. Some obviously is the effect of everyone being together, but fundamentally they love the environment. It has natural plants as well in each of the floors, so they're live plants, not plastic plants. They've got the timber, they've got the light, and there's plenty of space, and staff love working in here. We've got tenants in here that are paying a premium per square metre compared to an alternative building because it's timber. They are mostly global and national public companies who have ESG responsibilities. They have to report, and therefore they are prepared to pay a premium to have that resolved for them. So that naturally means rents are higher, therefore the value of the building's higher. You've got a culture in Northern Europe, particularly where most of the supply comes from, of nature and timber and forests, and government requires 40 or 50% of all new buildings to have a significant timber component of up to 60%. And once regulation drives the start of using things like timber, then over time it becomes just a natural progression. And it'd be great to see Australia do something the same, to say, okay, we're going to regulate that all new buildings of this size must have X percent of timber in it for the benefit of the environment. And that would drive the industry in Australia significantly. It guarantees investment. Great learnings from the building company, and that transferred to them from experts who came in from Brisbane job, Melbourne job. So that skill set's now in Tasman. I mean, that's pretty valuable. Would have been good to use Australian timber rather than German. Tasmania needs a significant investment to make mass timber in Tasmania to a scale that would be economically affordable to use. We've got to look and say what is unique about Tasmania, and would the global market pay a premium because it comes from Tasmania, where it's got clean power, where it's got sustainably sourced timber, it's well certified, it's not using modern slavery to produce it or anything else. You know that it's come from that source, and you can use that in your ESG to say, we know we got the cleanest, best timber. If that can get a global reputation, just like Tasmanian wine or other Tasmanian things, we've got a very strong brand in Tassie, and that sort of stuff can happen.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. All the GLTs, the larger beams, and that came out of Europe. They're now available in Australia, out of Australian and Tasmanian timbers. So if you have any inquiries on a building like St. Luke's, it can now be made in country and mainly on island. So Western Junction Sawmill, McKay's Timbers, Britain's, everyone's in value adding in the way of finger joining, laminating, and that. So we'll talk about that as we go on. The aesthetic appeal of timber is just unparalleled. So I'd like to talk a little bit about flooring in the commercial applications, and this is the classic flooring that's in the Hobart City Hall that was flooded and the floor was had to be ripped up. It was replaced with like for like because of the heritage build. But this is a super high traffic area of Tas Oak. Beautiful floor. Specifying timber flooring, key attributes for specification. Species, of course, which will define colour, grade and look. Sizing, width and thickness. If you think about sizing, width and thickness, there has been a fashion trend to go to wider and wider floorings, which give more and more trouble and more issues with shrinkage and unit shrinkage in the build. If you look at a basketball court, you rarely see a piece of material that's over 65 mils wide on super high traffic areas with very little to no shrinkage between units. Moisture content also now, suitability to supplier and suitability to the supplied built environment, i.e. we've supplied some material to Victoria at a very low moisture content to go straight into a fully air-conditioned, fully above and below floor air-conditioned build, which had to have a very tight moisture content specification. Please talk to your suppliers. They're very open to talk on these things. Style of flooring, profile, end matching, a whole heap of things. Companies like McKay's and Britton's are doing set length products. So, there's some opportunity to actually maximise value in your commercial applications. Please talk to the suppliers. And the purpose of the floor becomes key. Commercial, residential, sports floor. If you look at sports floors, not limited to basketball courts, but including basketball courts, you're looking at massive floors that require reasonable cleaning. They require, good serviceability and the ability to recoat. So they're purposely made with the profiles are purposely thicker. They have larger overland thicknesses so you can resand. This is a great one. This is a Hutchins School. This is Tasmanian obliqua, supplied by Britton's. Also, if you look, you can see the acoustic panels on the roof are mismatched Tas Oak veneer. So again, an exciting thing for a commercial or other applications, as in schools and that. Again, small unit size equals small unit shrinkage. It's not to say that larger flooring doesn't work, but it is more problematic the wider you go. Benefits of timber, obviously aesthetic appeal. That needs no explanation. Durability, timber floors are incredibly durable. They're also can be recoated. Scuffs are easier to do. Carpets and tiles, vinyls don't have the resilience that a timber floor has. And you can't just, take a sander, restore a part of a floor. If you're looking at something that's going to be there for a lifetime, timber is definitely the answer. Versatility of design goes without saying. If you look at builds like Wardle's shed, the way that they've used timber in the floor to the stairs to the soffits, it gives a total feel. Improved acoustics, depending how the floor's done, and temperature regulation, which is timber is a natural regulator, and it does help. Functional beauty. If you look at the floor in this photo, and it's the River's Edge building, again by Wardles, that's Tasmanian blue gum, which is really interesting. That floor was actually flooded and during construction and let dry, resanded, recoated, and it's still in perfect condition. And you wouldn't get that with any other floor or substrate. Soffits and ceilings. My State Arena, beautiful job. For architectural projects, celery top pine has become very popular again and generally regarded as a preferred Tasmanian species. Tasmanian oak remains the most commonly specified option for internal ceilings mainly because of its colour and versatility. It's also often used outside with the correct detailing, and I know companies like Britton's and that sell an outside cladding in Tas oak, as do McKay's and others. But it's all about letting the company know what you're actually trying to achieve with it, so they can actually detail for that. Um, of course, all minor species are widely used inside, and you saw some of that in the St Luke's build before with a lot of Blackheart sassafras veneer. Okay, Tas oak, light contemporary appearance, readily available. And don't be scared to actually ask for profiles. There are massive profiles available in all of these species. The common profiles, tongue and groove boards, V joints, shiplaps internally, but also square butt sides, secret fixed panels, timber battens over acoustic backings. There's a myriad of things that the companies can supply. And a lot of the companies will actually reach out to the end external surface required timber with better natural durability. Celery top pine's great. Ewan pine's brilliant, but the three logs that are pulled out of Tasmania, or the small amount, sorry, that's pulled out of Tasmania in a year, doesn't work. Um, Durability enhanced Tasmanian oak, treated or modified, is used in a great deal of soffits that are external soffits that are actually undercover. So, it is a good and useful timber for ceilings and entry canopies and things like that. Design considerations are wide. The University of Tasmania have been doing a lot of work through Dr. Mark Dewsbury, providing adequate ventilation behind lining boards, stainless steel fixings, of course, UV resistant exterior coatings, allowing for movement, again, is a consideration, and acoustic insulation behind internal ceilings in commercial buildings has become more and more of a normal. So it's something to actually think about during the process. Again, this is why veneer panels are such a good option. Cladding, we talked about Tas oak outside, and this is a Tasmanian oak cladding, charred Tasmanian oak, fully exposed. And I mean, when I say fully exposed, I mean fully exposed to the river, to the water. Um, it's still there. It's beautiful. It's standing up lovely. The other one is celery top pine cladding, which was supplied by Hydrowood out of Lake Pyman. That build's been there 4 or 5 years now in that state. The actual lights you see behind the windows, they're actually shutters, not just a wall. So, this has stood up brilliantly. It's allowed to have greyed off, so it's a natural celery top colour. Um, we have to make, and you have to look at the selected timbers with natural durability. You can find that in Australian Standard 5604, or use a suitably treated or coated timber where necessary. Celery top pines class 3, Tasmanian oak, class 3 to 4. It's generally either specifically detailed or treated if you're using Tas oak. For exposed external cladding, celery top pine, as I said, has been hit its straps yet again. Ewan pine, technically excellent, but generally unavailable for commercial cladding due to strict harvesting controls. Modified Tasmanian timbers of all styles, including, Tas oak, blackwood, and that, when available. Um, and they're modified and treated. They're durable when they're treated. The dimensional stability's there. It adds resistance to decay, weathering performance. And the modified Tas oak is increasingly used for contemporary claddings, as you could see in the sauna shed. Design considerations, there are many. If you're using a rain screen system, use a ventilated rain screen system with a drained cavity. Keep timber clear of the ground, and a lot of the timber companies will have their own criteria for that. Obviously, stainless steel fittings, if appropriate, UV resistant coatings. and make sure as designers and architects that you comply with the the Australian standards, the national codes. Um, but also remember there's a fit for purpose contingent in most of these things that would allow you to step outside if you can provide a solution. So, don't blinker on to just what's into 1684. I love this quote from Hans Joachim Senelber. It says, "This is what a climate solution looks like from the inside. Mass timber isn't just better for the planet, it creates a space that feels fundamentally different to work and live in. Warm, light-filled, quiet, and every beam and panel is quietly doing something concrete and steel could never, locking carbon away for the life of a building." And if you go back to Martin Rees's video, I'll highlight the fact that they've attained better commercial considerations because of the timber build. They've locked up carbon. They've looked to the future, and that's very strong business strategy. Mass timber comes in two styles: CLT and GLT. Cross laminated timber, which we'll talk about in a minute, and glue laminated timber. Both of them are available from Australia. They don't have to be imported, especially the GLT. There'll be more made on island. CLT, there is still a plant at Wynyard that is capable of making CLT, but there's also multiple plants across Australia making CLT panels. As you can see, beautiful big beams. Comparison: CLT cross-laminated layers of timber boards glued at 90, large solid that form large solid panels, primary use, floors, walls, roofs, shear walls, lift shafts, things like that. Strength in two directions, moderate spans. Thicknesses are varied and can be anything, and it depends on the species. Glue laminated timber is timber laminations glued parallel to the grain, and there gets to be some confusion between CLT and GLT and where you use it. Early engagement with your timber engineers, and that'll give you all these answers. Yes, you can use CLT in places it can use GLT. GLT is not suitable for large shear walls, things like that, but great for beams, columns, arches. And you can curve it and shape it. You can preload it, your longer spans. If we look at Mac Point, there'll be 20-metre spans between the steel roof purlings, 860 cubic metres of it, in fact. Cross-laminated, the advantage is it's excellent for prefabricated walls. An example is the River's Edge building at UTAS at Inveresk. There were two sets of stairs put up within a month of each other. One side was CLT, the other side was concrete. The concrete took 2.5 weeks with 5 trades, and it closed off that area for that period of time. The CLT stairs went up in 3.5 hours. So the off-site, the pre-machining, the accuracy allows CLT and mass timbers to go up very, very quickly in the build. And that's what was found with the St Luke's build, which when I talked to the general manager of Fairbrothers who put it up, said we'd be 3 or 4 months in front of where I'd expect to be on a conventional build. So yeah, it's definitely worth looking at mass timbers. Some Knighton CLT, which was made by Cusp up in Wynyard, and which is what you've seen in the St Luke's build. GLT is made by bonding timber laminations with the grain running in the same direction. Long span, large widths. Those 600 by 450 beams can be made in Australia and in Tasmania. So, great for things like beams, columns, even decorative that we've seen in Melbourne of late, where people have actually used it round as an extra purling around windows and that, and glass fitted directly to it. It's great. Roof structures are where it really shines, and the new Mac Point project has going to be one of those examples. As you can see, that's a stack of GLTs made from eucalyptus nitens, shining gum, um, manufactured in Wynyard and going out to the market. I can't walk away from this visual. The use of veneer and that in this beautiful, beautiful build by Wardles at the river's edge. You walk into the building and you look up, and it's just a magnificent sight. And it's such a practical use of timber. Uh, Timber is a decorative building material, and it goes on a substrate. It's interesting. What I find interesting is the surface coverage of veneer is approximately 40 times more than a piece of 25 timber, which makes it far more economical way of utilising the precious wood. 1 cubic metre of log produces around 1,000 square metres of real timber in veneer form. So if you take that in and you've got, things like the ceilings in the St Luke's build with the black heart sassafras and that, where it's a very limited resource, the use of a 0.85 mil thick veneer over a substrate is a great way to get the timber into the build, the feel, the look, and it's quite economic. Again, it's being used. This is at the Cradle Coast at the Burnie Uni campus, and these acoustic panels are all the way through. So they're mismatched Tas oak and are quite beautiful. A list of considerations put out by the Veneer Association of Australia. Name of the veneer species, type of cut, crown, quarter cut, rotary cut. If you go onto their websites, if you go onto someone like Britain Timber's website, you'll see all these on their websites. You'll see the direction of the grain and the visual appeal that you're looking at. You need to know the veneer supplier and the contacts, the log or the batch number if a natural veneer is selected. Matching type, so you can book match it, slip match it, random match it. There are a whole heap of things available to you in getting veneer into the visual application that you want to. Substrates, particle board, plywood, or MDF. We've done some work, and I know the university's done some work with tar and plywood made out of Tasmania. They've used a Tasmanian oak veneer from Britain's over the top. Edging types and thicknesses, polish types and gloss levels are something that the interior designers especially look at. And something that people don't look at as often is whether it's an open or a filled grain. So reflectance values on that are quite different. So it's something that you need to have a look at. And also, I'd suggest to get an indicative finish sample prior to manufacture. Have a look at it. Talk to the guys. If you're looking at Britain's, talk to the team there. They'll be able to supply you a finished piece that will be indicative of what you're going to receive. Irrespective of what it is, it needs to be fit for purpose. An example for that for solid boards is AS2796 Part 2. Moisture content, machinery tolerances, general form and consistency all have to be there. The piece, whether it be veneer, solid, GLT, CLT, in the commercial application, need to meet the fit for purpose criteria. Performance requirements, suitable resistance to service conditions, hardness, toughness, and durability. And I'll go back to flooring. If you look at that classic floor at the Hobart City Hall, which gets extremely high traffic, it's got things rolled over it all the time for displays and that. It's Tasmanian oak. It's not the hardest material, but it's got a suitable coating that allows it to work in these kinds of areas. Tas timber species, unique geography environment, some of the finest cool temperature hardwood forests in the world, and expanding hardwood and softwood plantation estate. and we'll be seeing a lot more of the hardwood plantation estate in the near future. The species, again, Tas oak, Tasmanian shining gum, which is Eucalyptus nitens, which we're seeing more of out of the plantations, both private and public. Blackwood, myrtle, celery top pine, sassafras, and Yuan pine are all still available in differing levels from differing suppliers. But if you want to give us a call on the 1300 number, we can actually put you in contact with suppliers for any or all of these products out of Tasmania or Tasmanian product out of mainland states. Again, Tas oak, we have the full technical details on, what Tas oak is, where it is, fire certificates and everything are available on the Tas Timber website. Lovely. Thank you, guys. Has anyone got any questions? Poppy.
Thank you, Mick. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat. But thank you everyone for joining us today. There's one more session remaining of the 5-part webinar series. That will be held Wednesday, the 29th of July. So we'll be discussing native and plantation sustainability and supply and why we need both. We'll look forward to having you join us for that. But if you've also missed any of our previous webinar sessions from the series, you can find those recordings on our website at tasmaniantimber.com.au. But I think that brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you, Mick.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you,
Poppy. And
everyone.
don't forget, guys, if you need anything, the 1300 numbers on the Tas Timber website, just jump on, give us a call. We can facilitate, hook you through to suppliers, talk about, give you the technical data that maybe not on the website, so we can point you in the right direction. I think for most of the things, if we can't, we can find someone who can.
Brilliant. Thank you, and thanks
Thanks,
everyone
guys.
again.